Hey wives, I see you. I know the pressure you're carrying, the pressure to be the perfect wife, the devoted mother, the woman who keeps it all together. You're told to be soft, feminine, and gentle, yet also strong, capable, and a provider. The world pulls you in 100 directions, stretching you thin, leaving you exhausted, and wondering if you're enough. But I need you to hear this. God has more for you. More for your marriage, more for your motherhood, more for the legacy you are building. You are not meant to do this on your own strength, so press in, do the work, and trust that something greater is coming. Welcome to the United Christian Marriage Podcast, where we help you build a healthy, united marriage that impacts everyone around you now and for generations to come. Today, we are talking with Britton, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her story. So, Britton, do you want to just introduce yourself real fast and give the listeners an idea of where you're coming from?
So my name is Britton George. I currently live in Idaho. I was North Dakota born and raised and moved to Idaho in 2018 to pursue my degree in school psychology. So I moved out here for a few reasons, but part of that was grad school. I am a wife and a mom of four boys and pretty recently got into coaching and podcasting and kind of stepping out into I feel like God's kind of calling me away from public education and more into ministry work. So it's a little bit about who I am. I take my psych background and kind of meld that with biblical practice in order to minister to women that are trying to overcome anxiety or a spirit of fear and walk into more of a bold, courageous, purpose-filled life.
I love that. My first question for you is, can you take us back to your surrender moment when it comes to marriage and what was happening in your life at that time? I know that you guys have a blended family, so where did
hmm
that start for you?
I guess to rewind even a little further, I got married and had my first child at 19 years old. My ex-husband was in the military, and it was hard, right? Like, especially as a 19-year-old young mother, um, just our experience in that marriage was very difficult, and my ex-husband brought in a lot of trauma, a lot of generational trauma, a lot of like he didn't know his dad, and his mother had been in and out of prison, struggling with substance abuse issues. And so, really, his childhood really impacted him. And as a 19-year-old, I didn't fully understand the extent of that. So, he and I had two children together, and then we did end up getting divorced after about 6 years of marriage. So, I was a single mom for a while. And then I met my now husband, and we've been together, um, oh my gosh, almost 10 years, which is wild. Um, and so kind of our story, we now have two children together. So my son's going to be 15 in just a couple days, and then a 10-year-old from that first marriage. And then we have a 5 and 4-year-old together. So, um, to specifically talk about like surrender in my relationship now, and that's really where my testimony comes from, was me having to learn to surrender. So when my now husband and I met, I wasn't very active in my faith. Like I was raised in a blended Catholic Lutheran household, so pretty like traditional um, religious upbringing. Um, and I remember in middle school, I went to youth group, which was non-denominational, and I started to kind of question like some of the things I was being taught in the Catholic Church. And no disrespect to the Catholic Church, because I love my grandparents, I love my 30 some cousins and my aunts and my uncles, and I have a lot of respect for it, but I just felt that there were some things maybe taught that weren't biblical. So I started kind of struggling with that. In that I never lost my faith. Like I've never questioned if God is real or if Jesus loves me or like any of those things. I've just kind of, I think I was missing the relationship piece. So in my young adult life, I wasn't very active in my faith. And when I met my now husband, I wasn't active in my faith. Like not attending church regularly, not reading my Bible, not really living like a Christian life is what I mean by not active. And so my husband, actually at the time, identified as atheist. I would say maybe a little bit more agnostic just based off of our conversations we had at the time. But anyway, that's kind of where our relationship started. And so we were together for about 4 years. And then we had my son. We were supposed to get married in 2020. We were living together again because I wasn't active in my faith at that time, and that wasn't something he valued either. So we lived together. We had our first child, and then COVID kind of hit. And so at this time, we had moved from North Dakota to Idaho. So we were already pretty didn't have like a big support system because we were in a brand new state where we didn't have a lot of family or friends or any of those things. And then almost immediately once we got here, I got pregnant with our first child. And then almost immediately after that, everything shut down with COVID. So we were pretty isolated. And so my husband is very social. And he's very, at that time, he was super physically active, like working out multiple times a day. He was big into jiu-jitsu and MMA. And so being stuck at home and isolated from like all social contact was really, really hard for him. And then going to like working from home. So he kind of started to try to solve that problem in not great ways, like self-medicating. He was depressed. He was drinking too much. He was abusing his ADHD medication. Like, really, I just saw him, like I was losing him right before my eyes. Like, I didn't recognize him. My heart was breaking for him because I could see how much he was struggling. And so, in that, I kind of started to I found a church that I really loved, and we started attending it online because we only got to go to one service. And he did go with me, but we only got to go to one service, and then things shut down. So I started attending online and ordered a Bible and just got more active in my faith, but continued to watch him struggle. And so my reaction to that was like, I need to fix it. Like, I need to fix all of his hurting and his suffering and his problems and his mental health. And like, I can fix it. I have all the answers. Like, just this kind of went on over a period of a couple years. So once things opened up more, it was like, okay, like everything's good now. We can go back to our normal lives. Like go join a rec league and go back to the gym. And but he had already kind of created like these demons that I was seeing him struggle with, right? So it wasn't that easy for him to just like now go back to as normal. So my reaction, and I was pregnant again because our two I call them babies. They're not babies anymore at all. But they're only 18 months apart. So I was already pregnant with our second child. Um, and I just get this visual in my mind when I think of it, is I was literally like squeezing on so hard, trying to control everything and like trying to give him all of the answers. And like sometimes that was me trying to be like super loving and probably like hovering. And sometimes that was me being really like mean and cold and distant, and almost like punishing him. Like, okay, like if love's not going to work, maybe tough love will work. And maybe if I withhold affection, then he'll change something to then gain access to that affection again, right? So really what I was trying to do is control things that I had no business trying to control because it really had nothing to do with me. Um, so anyway, and I'm sorry to be long-winded, but
No, you're
what
fine.
ended up what ended up happening was I just like was at my wit's end. We had a horrible incident at our house that I won't get too deep into, but it really was like his rock bottom. And it was just so heartbreaking to me because I was like, I don't recognize, like, you are my best friend. Like, I love my husband. He's literally my favorite person in the whole world. And I didn't recognize him anymore. So I had went to church and I went up to the altar call and I just I remember there was this little woman. She was just tiny and I mean, she was holding me up. I had nothing left in me. And I was just bawling and just telling her what was going on. And like, my husband is struggling with this and I'm trying to help him and it's just making it worse. And now he's got guilt and shame and he already feels guilt and shame. Like, I don't want to make him feel more guilt and shame, but like, I'm resentful and I'm hurting at this point, right? So the whole dynamic. And so she just held me and prayed over me. And I just heard God so audibly tell me that it was done and that I needed to leave it with Him and that I needed to give it to Him, which was interesting because what my mom and my grandpa always told me during that time period is give it to God. And I'm just like, okay, grandpa, like that's super cute, but I don't know how to do that. Like I am very type A personality. I don't know what that means. Like I wish I could just like hand it over to him and be like, here, God, take this. Now my life is all rainbow and sunshine and it's beautiful and no more problems. And that's not the reality. But because God told me to give it to him, I walked away from the altar still feeling fearful, right? Because I still don't know what the outcome's going to be, but I still had like this sense of peace within me that I hadn't had before of like God's got me. God has me no matter what happens, whether we survive this or we don't survive this together, like I know God's got me and I need to learn and teach myself how to actively and intentionally give it to him. And so what God kind of guided me to do is to really assess like what can I can control and what can I not control. And what I could control in those choices was I could show up every Sunday at church. I could love my husband while still having boundaries for myself. I could give him space by focusing on myself and fixing myself with God through the things that I needed to work on, like my false sense of control and my anxiety and my functioning out of fear. And in that, I could pray for him and pray that he would kind of follow my lead. And either he was going to or he was not going to. So that was my moment of surrender. And I made a plan. I ordered a forgiveness journal because I didn't know how to forgive him, and I knew that was going to be a big part of it. And I just really started focusing on my relationship with God and what God was trying to tell me to do.
I love that. And I just want to jump in here real fast and say that I heard
Mm-hmm.
a few things. So, one, it like breaks my heart that I wasn't there when you were even in your first marriage going through all of that, because that is very similar to what me and my husband went through. You know, married at 18, I was pregnant at 17, had my second baby at 19, and we both came from trauma backgrounds. So thankfully, like because I also went through a lot of things
Mm,
and had my own problems, I was able to empathize a little more and understand at an age where maybe most 19-year-olds wouldn't be able to. So I'm so thankful for that, and that's definitely my heart is to catch people in that stage and help them there. But
mm-hmm.
I love that like you got to your second marriage and you did not let go. You didn't give up. Like you hit that hard period and you knew that there was something to hang on to and you stuck it out until God intervened. And I think that that alone just deserves credit and deserves recognizing because some people they go through those moments and they say, well, you're just not the person I married, so I'm gone. And that's heartbreaking to God
Mm-hmm.
because we're all going to change and ebb and flow. And, we said for better or for worse, right? So that's
Right.
beautiful. And the other thing I wanted to say is, your husband's not a believer, is he? Or has he since found Christ?
That is something I pray for literally every day. So we go to church together every week. He prays with our kids every night. I would not say that he's saved. And so every week in church, I'm like, please just raise your hand. Like, please, Lord, just touch his heart. But actually, um, I've noticed even in the last week, every evening he's come to me and started like asking me questions. And he's never done that before. Like, well, like, pastor talked about this. He's trying to get there. Like I see it. I see it where I haven't before. He's always been very supportive of my faith. I think um I don't know. I think he's at a turning point, but he struggles with his self-worth. I think he's one of those that like struggles with like why would a God love me so much? Like what's so special about me? I think he finds that. And I don't mean to speak for him. I don't know for sure. That's just kind of what I see stirring in some of the questions he's been asking me lately. And he's trying to kind of reconcile. He's come a long way, a long way. I mean, when I met him, he probably wouldn't have even stepped foot in a church. He also grew up in a Catholic upbringing, so he does have like some religious trauma behind that as well. So the short answer is no, he's not saved. He's not active in faith, but he supports it within our household, and he's at a point where I can see him starting to question. So I really feel like God's working on his heart more than he maybe had been previously. So,
That is, that's wonderful. And for anyone listening who might be in that spot of like your your spouse is not equally yoked, whether
hmm.
they are just completely not a believer, or maybe you guys are just at different points, because I think we all go through this in marriage in some form. Like I've never met a married person that said yes. For every year of our marriage, we were in the exact same spiritual place, and like we never were in different points. And I was just talking to
Yeah.
someone about this. It's kind of like this push and pull that you do. And because you're not at the same place, sometimes it actually helps you get where you're going a lot faster because you challenge each other and you don't mean to. And it's when we don't mean to that we do it the most. We end up pulling them
Yes.
into the faith with us. And so I wanted to read this verse, 1 Corinthians 7:16. Don't you wives realize that your husbands might be saved because of you? And that whole chapter is really good. I would read the whole chapter, but for sake
Writing
of
it
time,
down.
that's. And then I also wanted to read you guys First Peter 3, and this is just verse 1. In the same way, you wives must accept the authority of your husbands. Then, even if some refuse to obey the good news, your godly lives will speak to them without any words. They will be won over. And the reason I wanted to read that one too is because sometimes I see in these groups or on Facebook or in conversations, wives will say, well, if my husband is not walking with the Lord, then I don't need to submit to him because he's not under the authority of Christ. And
Hmm.
while I see what people are saying in that sense, like I don't think you should do something that your husband told you to do if it's unbiblical. Like if it specifically says in the Bible it's a sin. But what I want to ask you is, how have you navigated that of trying to be in submission to your husband while also growing your faith and, sticking to those boundaries for you?
Oh, that's such a good question. And this is the part. So my story I just told you of actually being at the altar was back in like 2021, so 4 years ago. I still feel like I'm very actively walking in that surrender through continuing to pray and believe and model to my husband, just praying that Jesus is going to reach his heart and touch his heart, right? He's going to have like a Holy Spirit moment. Um, Again, by me just focusing on my faith and hoping and praying. And what you just read to me is very validating that he sees that in me and he recognizes that like that's actually not me. That's the Holy Spirit. That's Jesus. That's my faith. That's what God did for me. Like that's it's not me, that's God in me and through me and with me, right? Um, as far as so I do vision boards every year. I love doing like a prayer board where I actually hosted a party this year because it's something I usually do on my own. And I had a whole group of women and it was so fun. But one of the things I wrote on my prayer board for this year is be a biblical wife. Um, because that is an area I could improve in. I think I've driven the point home that I'm very like type A, I'm a go-getter, I'm super driven, I have a hard time sitting still. And my husband is the complete opposite. Like he's not to say that he doesn't have drive, but he's just very like fly by the seat of my pants, everything's good, no stress. And so we balance each other well in that way. Um, but I want to learn to, and that's what I've been studying, and so I appreciate that scripture because I'm going to dive more into it. But I want to learn how to be a more biblical wife, especially if my dream is for my husband to really be like a man of God and lead a godly household as a biblical husband. He's not there yet. I have full faith that he will get there. In the meantime, what I recognized as I was really praying on this upcoming year is that doesn't mean, like you just said, that I can't be a biblical wife, and hope that through that and through my modeling of that and my walk with that, that could inspire or lead him in that direction as well. So I guess I don't have an answer as far as how I do that. That's something I'm actively pursuing and praying about right now. That's a big thing for me this year is figuring out how to do that. I also think that's why he's been asking more questions recently. Like I said, I'm kind of in this big shift right now where I'm called more into ministry. Um, and I think he sees that. He's starting to see it in me because I'm so active in it now. It's not just church on Sundays and it's not just like, let's pray with the boys at the end of the night. It's kind of I just have such a like heart and fire for Jesus right now that it's shining through in literally everything I do, right? And so I think he sees that and I think he sees how that's changing me in such a positive way. And so I'm hoping if that's kind of triggering something in him right now, as I also pursue being more of a biblical wife in the same way I can kind of be mirror back onto him how he could also do that without making him and without controlling him and without giving him the answers, but just really walking in that faith and hoping that he sees God through that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was so good. And I love that you're just like, I don't have the answer to that because sometimes we
Yeah,
can be scared to say that, but it's so good to just say, I don't know when we don't know. And I use that tool in my parenting all the time because my toddler asks a million questions. I'm like, I don't know. I don't
I
know.
don't know. It's okay to not know.
Yeah.
But and I love that I mean, you asked the question, and even though I don't have the answer, it's so good because it's something I need to consider. And it's really aligned with what I'm trying to accomplish this year. So it's a great question.
I think too, just for anyone listening who's like, okay, well, what's an answer? A
Right.
great place to start is just to make sure you're phrasing things like, I would love, instead of, trying to go the complaining route. And I try not to say nagging because I know that word triggered me for so long. Like now
Uh-huh.
I can say it and not feel triggered, but for most of my marriage, I could not. You couldn't even say the word to me, and because I was so offended by it. I'm like, I'm not a nagging wife because I just truly could not see how I was nagging him. And so now that I know how to communicate my feelings without nagging him, it's so much easier for me to see this. But if you're in that place where you don't see it, then just start by saying what you want very clearly. Like, I would love one day to see you step into the Christian faith and get curious about the Bible and what it looks like to lead our family, according to what the Bible says. And saying things like that are just, they're very clear, almost unemotional, because when we bring those like big negative emotions with us into the conversation, we almost always start by saying it the wrong way. And we don't want to start the conversation by saying, how come you never, lead our family spiritually? How come you never blank? Why don't you ever go about it this way? Those types of things where to us, we may think we're saying the same thing, but to them, they're hearing it completely different. So I want to throw that in there for anyone listening.
That's so good. I love that. Even from a psychological standpoint, I love, right, we're taught like those I feel statements. But I really like that idea of I would love. Like that speaks to your heart, right? And any husband and any wife should want, like I feel like that's coming from a heart place. Like you said, it's not a you're not criticizing, you're not nagging, you're just saying I would love this. Like this would bring me joy. And what husband wouldn't be touched by that in a different way than I need you to do this. Why don't you do this? Do this differently. I want this. Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Yeah, it works because husbands default to wanting to be the provider, and you're telling them directly how they can provide joy to
Mm,
you. So, it really it's changed my marriage to just word things that way. And the other thing I want to throw in here too is don't expect an immediate change because sometimes when we think, oh, well, if I say it now, then it needs to happen today. And if I see nothing change, then I need to bring it up again. But
hmm.
when we bring it up and then we complain about how nothing's changed or we say it again a different way, the whole thing we're trying to avoid is adding another thing to their to-do list because let me just reassure you guys, your husband doesn't need another thing on his to-do list, and you don't want to be one of the things on his to-do list. So that's why it works. Now, I'm going to stop rambling so I can ask you this question. Um, so you do have a background in psychology. You have learned a little bit about this trauma side of things. And so I'm just curious, how has that shaped the way that you see your marriage, how you even see surrendering to God, and has that affected the way that like you operate your home and your family?
Yeah, that's another really great question. So my training and study, so I work particularly with kids, right? And I think what that has shown me is working with children that are dealing with trauma and knowing the actual neurological processes that are happening like in a trauma response. It's easier for me to connect now. Well, first of all, in my first marriage, I can see it so much more clearly and understand it, right? Like hindsight is always 2020. I have so much training that I didn't have then. Like you said, even as like a 19-year-old being able to understand at that time what my husband was going through, and I always felt like he was doing things to me. Really, he was just struggling with his own traumas. Um, that again, I couldn't control, but I could have responded differently. And so what that brings into my marriage now with my husband now, he also has some trauma. I think most of us do, right? His mom has passed away. She passed away before I met him, actually. He was, I think, around like 19 years old. And that upbringing with her was rough. His dad is phenomenal. And his dad did most of the raising. And I think that's where some of my husband's struggle with like his self-worth comes from, is that relationship with his mom and her not being always active. Um, but what I would say is, I've always said that trauma or experiences, or even like mental health struggles, even if you're like diagnosed, it's like a true chemical imbalance, right? Like a mental health diagnosis is just as valid as any physical diagnoses. Um, However, I am a very firm believer in that might explain behavior. It doesn't excuse behavior. So if there is, I'm trying not to get too like psyche, but if there's a behavior, whatever that might be, that I might not like maybe my husband is withdrawing into himself rather than opening up to me if we're going through something or he's feeling something or he's feeling a certain way, and I start to see him withdraw into himself, that immediately triggers me into like, oh my gosh, we're gonna go right back to 2020. This is terrifying. Like, stop, stop, stop. And I want to control, and then right, I want to go right back into my pattern of like, don't let this happen. You can't take a nap. You must be depressed. Like, you're gonna shut down on me. Like, I go into this total fear response. Um, but knowing now and having a better understanding of mental health, even than I did back when he was going through this in 2020, because I was just getting into my training, right? At that point, I just had a teaching degree. I had an education degree. Um, how I respond is so much different because his response, the behavior that comes from that, I understand where it comes from more, so I can respond in a different way. I know that if I'm starting to see him kind of retreat into himself by me being too vocal or really like acting in any way that could look or be taken as a criticism, or if he like senses like my fear, my panic, my anxiety, it really just makes it worse because then he goes to this place of like guilt and shame and cool, like I'm already stressed, I'm already kind of struggling with this, and now I'm also stressing my wife out, and then that makes me feel worse, right? Like it just exacerbates the problem. So coming from a very loving place and a supportive place, but also balancing that with like, okay, we're not going to let this derail all the wonderful things. And so now really when I approach him, if he's dealing with that, it's more of a let's focus on all like our wonderful blessings. Like I get you're feeling this way. I validate that you're feeling this way. Let's go do something fun. Or let me just take care of the kids for a couple hours so you can take a nap. Or I think I'm just much more supportive and trusting that God has already made me a promise and I've seen that promise through. Like, God has already told me that that's done, and that's been very true in our relationship. My husband did. Like, thank God he did. He did follow me. He did help himself when I gave him room to do that. When I gave him room to not have like this vice grip on him, he was able to breathe, and he'll even tell me he's like he saw it, he saw me like give him room, and then in that he was able to not have so much guilt and shame and take steps then for himself because he saw like I was doing all these things, so then he's like, okay, what do I need to do for myself? Like I surrendered that to God, and that doesn't change just because we're 4 years down the road. So while he may still have bouts of, especially like seasonal depression or things like that, I believe God. And God told me it is done. And God told me that it was going to be okay. And I know that God has good plans for me and for my marriage and for my life. And so even if we're going through a hard spot, I don't have to panic and I don't have to react in fear and I don't have to try to control all of the things and take on what my spouse might be dealing with at the time. And then it goes the other way, right? We pick each other up when we need to be picked up. And like sometimes I need a little bit more from him because work's really hard, or I'm maybe working with a kiddo that it's hard to let go of that when I come back home, when I know what that kiddo's dealing with at home. Or maybe like his business is kind of in a lull and he's getting hard on himself. So I think surrender is I said it in the beginning, it's very intentional. And you just have to remind yourself, like, God has good plans for me. He has plans for a hope and a future. God has already seen me through this tough time in my marriage. He's not going to let it derail now, as long as I continue walking what he's calling me to walk in and kind of keep my end of the bargain, so to speak. Like I'm giving it to you, I've given it to you. I'm not going to now try and come take that back from God and be like, "Nope, let me control it now." Like it doesn't work that way.
Okay, that was wonderful. I really like how you explain both sides of that because I think that's true. There's always going to be give and take, and we always are just there to support each other. It's teamwork. So that was beautiful. Okay, so just to like wrap everything up in a nice little neat bow here, my question is, what do you want people to take away from this overall if you had to pick one thing? And where can people go to continue like hearing from you and learning more from you?
So I think the biggest, if I could just speak directly to even one person's heart that's maybe listening to this and struggles with um, surrender or wanting to keep control, is surrender seems, if you're anything like me, it seems very counterintuitive. It seems maybe like giving up or um, just deciding like I can't do this anymore. And that's really where you're at, but in that it doesn't mean like I'm giving up and I'm walking away. I can't do this anymore. It means this is too big for me. I really don't have any control here, and giving it to God is freeing. It's very freeing. It's a freedom. So I would just encourage them uh, to really to really look at what is surrender biblically. You can find me on my social. I'm sure you guys will link that. I do 5 days to peace, and I have a book called 10 Days to Peace. So you can also dig into it more in there.
Awesome. And then you have a podcast too, right? That they can go
Yes.
and listen to.
Yes, so that launches April 11th, 2025. It's called The Called and Courageous Christian Woman, and we dig into all of these topics at a much deeper level. I give some good action steps right within that podcast. And you can find that on any podcast streaming.
Awesome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you got so much value out of it. And if you loved this episode, could you do me a quick favor and click 5 stars and leave me a review? It would do wonders for spreading the podcast out to other people who need it, and it only takes a few seconds. If you have an additional few seconds, why don't you go ahead and screenshot the episode and share it to your stories so we can spread the message and get more families healed. Thank you, and until next time, I will be praying for you, and I hope you have a blessed day. Bye.